It was not intentional, but in 1848, George Marshall discovered gold along the American River in Coloma, California, northeast of what is now the city of Sacramento. Marshall was building a sawmill for Swiss settler John Sutter, who had a dream of turning the vast, fruitful lands of California into an agricultural mecca. Sutter's dream was ultimately dashed, though, with the discovery of gold. Once word got out, tens of thousands of foreigners worldwide descended upon California, hoping to cash in on a quick, enterprising venture. My great-great-grandfather, Jacob Christoph Brodbeck, was there. We call him Christoph I. And, fortunately for us, the 27-year-old Swiss chronicled his stay in California in a journal we've since translated into English. My dad, Christoph III, and I always wanted to retrace my great-great-grandfather's steps through the mountains and streams of Northern California, and in the spring of 2011, we did just that, tracking down the towns, brooks, and mountainsides where Christoph I took part in one of the most significant historical events of his time. We finally made it.
Yes, sir.
San Francisco.
Oh, yeah.
We met at San Francisco International Airport May 6th, rather late at night, but decided to start driving right away to get a head start on the first leg of our journey northbound. We were happy to get as far as Santa Rosa, California, where we stayed the night, got some breakfast in the morning, and made more detailed plans of where we wanted to be over the next day or two. The drive north on Interstate 101 is a pretty one. This is stunning Northern California scenery where vineyards and picturesque towns like Willits, California are in high supply. The further north you travel in this part of the United States, the bigger the trees become. Redwood trees, actually. These perennial giants dominate the region, lining highways and roads that led us to our first destination, the beautiful and historically significant town of Trinidad, California. It's the people of Trinidad that caused us to fall in love with this place. Christoph I arrived here February 2nd, 1851, via the steamer General Warren, about a year after he sailed into the Bay of San Francisco. Trinidad is tucked away high up in the northwest corner of California. It's a quaint and delightfully friendly town. Brodbeck's history, and that of others worldwide who descended upon California during the gold rush, is celebrated with great enthusiasm in these parts, most notably by Trinidad's most renowned historian, Ned Simmons.
The waves will go in, and if it's really working, it'll shoot higher than the island.
Oh, is that right?
Simmons and many of his colleagues from the Trinidad Historical Society rallied around our ancestors' story and his visit to their hometown in 1851, and they extended to us a very warm friendship during our stay there, something we'll never forget. We began Sunday like many do in Trinidad, a morning coffee and a home-baked muffin at the popular Beachcomber Cafe. It's where we met up with Michael Peterson, an archaeologist from Redwood National Park, who we arranged to spend the day with bushwhacking through the old 49ers Trail in Tall Trees Grove, where my great-great-grandfather ran mule packs with his gold-seeking entourage.
We're gonna head up on our adventure up here to the Tall Trees Grove up in Redwood National Park, and then go visit the 1849er Trail, the Trinidad Trail, parts of that. So, yeah.
How far is that from Trinidad?
We'll drive approximately 20 more minutes north here on Highway 101, and so we're talking about maybe 34 or 5 miles north, and then we'll go down the deep jungle of the giant redwoods.
And they are giants. Look at the size of this redwood, which has stood for hundreds of years. I can only imagine what Christoph I must have thought of this majestic forest when he traveled through this area. Peterson had made some significant findings in this part of the redwoods, identifying what he believes are some of the old trails used by gold miners in the late 1800s. He took us on an expedition to view some of these findings firsthand, along with his archaeologist colleague Rebecca and her daughter Pearl.
We're at the parking lot. You are here. We'll walk down the Tall Trees Trail, and about right in here, paralleling the Tall Trees Trail on a ridge, is the old Trinidad Trail. We're on the Tall Trees Trail, and we have marker number 5, which marks a location where the old Trinidad Trail likely or possibly crossed the Tall Trees Trail. We have a small segment back here, about 10-20 feet back in the bush here, that I think I've identified as part of the old 1851 Trinidad Trail. So then from this point it was a little difficult to find because of all the down timber, but you can see there is a good slope in here, a good cupped out trail.
We also learned what a goose pen is. It's a huge man-made cavity in a redwood used for shelter by early settlers and Native Americans, like this one.
This is where they would strap the mules down after leaving this spot, but maybe the night before they would have camped right here. People would have camped here. I did find some archaeological evidence here. I found a square nail, probably a late 1800s nail, since the trail was used past after 1850.
We stopped at Redwood Creek, where Michael treated us to a delicious lunch comprised of smoked salmon, brie cheese, and avocado and crackers. Christoph I crossed this creek 2 days after leaving Trinidad on July 30th, 1851.
It's unreal. Absolutely unreal. Look at that massive amount of wood, eh?
We got the trail marked here.
We moved on after lunch, bushwhacking through the old 49er trail Peterson had been tracking in previous months.
Got a little cut down creek here.
This is it.
Another flag.
How'd you do there, Michael? We found it.
Well, a little sweating and a little dirty after that, but I think we just rediscovered the old Trinidad Trail.
There, you found it.
There's the old
We found it.
49er.
I'm not cold anymore.
No.
Yes, sir.
A few things have grown in there since Christoph I ran some mule packs
Oh yeah.
through that path.
But you can just imagine. They had a pretty steep climb further up, but I think he complained about how steep it was.
And now we can see why.
Yeah.
It didn't take more than a few months for Brodbeck to wind down his operations in Trinidad and head back into the mines. After all, that's what he really came here for, gold. Brodbeck and others didn't travel halfway around the world to bake bread, sell grain, or watch boats sail into the bay of a California town. They came here to harvest gold. And on July 31st, 1851, Brodbeck and his colleagues left Trinidad and headed east into the mountains, back into the interior of Northern California, in search of the yellow metal they came here for in the first place. We drove up to Oric, California, and stopped for breakfast at a little place called the Palm Cafe. It was a cozy little spot that seemed to have some kind of Swiss connection. Nice place and very friendly people too. It was time to hit the road after that, in search of Christoph I's travels through the mountains, and what mountains they were. They traveled these hills by foot, with mules carrying their pickaxes, pots and pans, and food supplies. It was a tough journey, including long days of traveling up and down steep mountainsides. It was a treacherous leg for us too in a different way, driving along narrow roads, through hairpin turns and no guardrails. I don't mind saying I was scared to death. Fortunately for us though, my dad's Swiss mountain driving skills kicked in, and we made it safely through this part of our journey. We headed towards Wichipek in search of the Forks of Salmon, where the two salmon rivers meet and where my great-great-grandfather spent the night with his colleagues on August 6, 1851. There were tent stores there at the time, but no grass for the mules, and the boys had to buy barley for their animal transports at 37.5 cents per pound. This place didn't look that much more populated than it was 160 years ago, with the exception of this little fellow. Gold was discovered in the small town of Yreka, California in 1851. It wasn't long before miners poured into the area, with tents and shanty homes popping up throughout the community. Brodbeck arrived in Yreka in 1852, and he became part owner of a house in the small town that he and his partners ran as rental property. They named it Siskiyou House, and it was located near Yreka House, the largest hotel in the city. You can see it in this photo just on the left-hand side of the street. Brodbeck spent quite a bit of time in this area, including in nearby Scotts Valley, where he was a partner in the Kratiger Ranch. My dad and I arrived in Yreka May 9th. We stayed the night and enjoyed a great breakfast at the Black Bear Diner. One of the main objectives in this trip was not only to retrace my great-great-grandfather's steps, but to also find some type of documented evidence of his time in California. Building titles, old newspaper clippings, census reports, anything really. And on May 10th, we hit the jackpot. Our own little gold nugget at the Siskiyou County Museum, after pouring through pages of documents and census reports. With the help of museum staff, we found the 1852 census of Siskiyou County, and there it was, number 75, my great-great-grandfather's name. He was listed as Christian Brodbeck, but his age, 30 years old, and his country of origin confirmed it was him. Needless to say, this was one of the greatest highlights of our trip. The easy gold was long gone by the time Jacob Christoph Brodbeck washed his first share of yellow metal near San Antonio, California on April 4th, 1850. His first successful dig was a modest one, worth about $8 of gold, shared between him and his Prussian partner Henry Katger. It was found right here in San Antone Camp, a privately owned ranch, when we showed up to have a look at the spot where Christoph I dug his first bit of gold out of this riverbank. He worked this bank for about a week and managed to mine $104 worth of gold from the area. Not a bad first haul for a couple of gold diggers in 1850. But like many gold seekers of that time, Brodbeck discovered pretty quickly there were no great jackpots to be had in California. It was $100 here and $100 there, which after expenses didn't amount to too much. They moved around a lot to places like Hidden Diggins, or as the Spaniards called it, Jesus Maria, Christoph I wrote in his journal. They spent time in communities like McCollumney Hill, which still exists today. My dad and I spent some time there, going through the town and checking out some of the remnants of the old gold rush days. My great-great-grandfather's travels eventually took them to John Sutter's fort in September of 1850 in what is now downtown Sacramento, California. The fort still exists today as a museum, the middle building being an original structure showing what it was like to live as a gold miner in the mid-1850s. The main town there in those days was Old Sacramento City, not far from the fort, which is now a bustling tourist area. It's a great spot, and it gives you a pretty good idea of what it was like to live in the Old West at that time. Christoph I met a few Swiss countrymen in California during his stay there, and from his journal, we know he met a Eugene Meroz in Sacramento in 1850, a Swiss from Souvelier, Canton Bern, whom he befriended and eventually traveled back with to the big town, the city of San Francisco. San Francisco is one of the coolest cities you could ever visit. Its steep roadways, streetcars, and rich architecture, which changes from one block to the next as it spreads up the hills from the Bay of San Francisco, sets it apart from most North American cities. This was a town built on the earliest days of the California Gold Rush, and when Christoph I sailed into the Bay, California wasn't even a U.S. state yet. The way he described it in his journal sounds very similar to what you see today when you visit the place, a town where homes and structures extend up vast green hills from a bay that's dotted with rocky islands. The only difference now is that it's more modern with a larger population, but the geography hasn't changed. One of those small rocky islands Christoph I observed when he first arrived in San Francisco became known many years later as Alcatraz, the infamous California jail where notorious criminals like mobster Al Capone spent time behind bars. It's a popular tourist site now, and it's well worth a visit if you ever get to San Francisco. So too is a stop at AT&T Park, the home of the San Francisco Giants. We took in a Thursday afternoon matchup between the defending World Series champions and the Arizona Diamondbacks. We had a great time in California. We felt privileged to trace some of my great-great-grandfather's steps around Northern California. It gave us a tangible idea of the adventures he went through back in the 1850s, and we gained a whole new perspective on the sights, sounds, and smells of where Christoph I spent a good portion of his early years. It was quite the trip.
What do you say, sir? You have a good trip?
Very good trip. Excellent.
You had a good time?
We had a good time. We looked San Francisco over pretty good. And we're happy to go home.
Through the dead of the morning, as the neighborhood rose, I ran from my world, so nobody knows. It was Saturday morning, I was under my tree, I heard the birds sing, they were singing to me. I was under my tree. I was under my tree. Under my tree.
Well, here we are in Redwood National Park, and I'm going to show a little picture of a goosepin tree. It's a large redwood tree that's been burned by fire, and then later on the Native Americans and then the old settlers would use this tree, and they would use them for goose pins. So this tree here is what we call a goosepin tree. Now they would put their geese in there and for the night, and occasionally you still can find the old geese in there, and so, well, I think I can hear them. It sounds like Canadian geese. Yeah, I think that's got to be Canadian geese. Look at a whole flock of Canadian geese coming out of there. There's
Wait, which way are we going?